to Let's Talk Sense, the podcast that cuts through the noise and gets straight to the heart of what really is going on. Each week, we dive into a different topic, from send and current trends to the trends that are shaping our world. We're here to share different perspectives, offer honest insights, and have conversations that truly make sense of it all. Let's talk sense. Today I have a really important guest, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my guest before we get into our conversation. I'm not going to tell you her name first, I'm just going to tell you about her. This young lady studied A-level psychology, history and politics at St. Augustine's Church of England High School. She then went on to complete a BSc in psychology and an MSc in forensic psychology and mental health at Queen Mary University. She's presently the program manager at a national children's charity, and she believes strongly in opening the door and offering opportunities for those for whom the door has been closed for a while. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome my guest, and I'm going to ask her to tell us her name.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I mean, it's just very flattering. But yeah, no, my name is Besma.
Thank you very much, Bethany. I am very much interested in what you do, and I want us to talk sense about it and make sense of why we need what you do in today's world. Tell me exactly what is involved in your being a program manager.
Yeah, no, so I think what's involved specifically in my role and what I do is I manage our Access in Turns program, which to its core, it's all about, like you said, opening doors to disadvantaged and disabled year 13 students up and down the country. And the idea is to give them real bespoke, hands-on, skill-based work experience at kind of high institutions where they can hopefully get a career in the corporate sector and hopefully change the landscape of that world.
Okay, and how long has this program been running?
Yeah, so we launched a pilot we had our first successful pilot in August of 23. So we're now literally in the middle of our third cohort of interns. So it's a very exciting time, and we're hopefully all the results have been really good and very positive, and everybody's had a really good time, and it's been really informative to all of us stakeholders involved. So it's quite exciting.
Oh, lovely. Now, when you're about 3 years old, you're in your third cohort, how many students were in the first cohort, and where were you initially based? Were you in London or in other parts of the UK?
Yeah, so when we first launched kind of this concept, kind of trying to figure out if this is even a thing that can exist and work, we placed 3 kids kind of, and that was very kind of my own network of students I've worked with, or my colleagues' network, and also the employers were the same thing, very close network, because it was seen a bit as a risk, kind of because of the kind of the word disability in those circles can kind of be quite a scary word. So we did 3 in our first year, and now we are on 14 students. So that's
Well done.
really proud of myself and the team and everybody involved just to kind of start it growing, because it takes a minute
Mm.
to convince people on both sides.
It's interesting that you've used the word risk, and
Yeah.
you've spoken about possible hesitation from employers.
Mm.
Why do you think that this is so in 2020, 2023, 24?
Yeah, I think it comes down to language, unfortunately. I think the word disability, people have still to this day this image of an individual in a wheelchair. And I think they can't go away from that image, especially kind of when you're talking to more senior level individuals. I think the conversation is always a bit like they do want to help, but then they also have to think about their business and their day to day, and you can't expect, you know, £1 million organization to hit pause for 4 weeks over the summer. So I think so they look at it from a different angle, and I think my role is to really understand where they're coming from, but also at the same time challenge them and go, well, no, disability doesn't mean that. It's a very diverse and inclusive word, and I think it covers a lot more than you think. And I think especially now where the terminology of neurodiversity, which was I think starting to pop up in 23, and now it's being used more and more in that word. It's almost like, well, what's the difference? And there's almost a different set of connotation attached to those sets of words. So I
Yeah.
think it just comes down to language really, and that kind of exposure to what that word means.
Yeah, I like the fact that you've spoken about the need for exposure, because wherever there is ignorance, there is fear. If people don't know, they are less likely to be involved. And so I'm thinking, if we are doing a thrust of making people aware, then that will help to change their perspective. And you've now said you started with 3 persons and you're now moving on to 14, and things are changing. People are now talking about being neurodiverse. For those of us who might not be very au fait with the term, what exactly are we talking about when we talk about neurodiverse?
Yeah, so I think neurodiversity, at least to my understanding, has always been more about the brain's ability to kind of process information. I think so. It's more kind of a cognitive thing. So I think obviously, in I think most cases, neurodiversity is seen as an invisible disability. Some people who are neurodiverse wouldn't classify themselves as having a disability. So it's almost that you can see there's a real separation even within the community itself. So it's kind of you can expect everybody else to also not really understand the difference.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that's kind of it's your own brain processing and how you interpret information and kind of carry out your day-to-day job.
A lot about how I do things different from how another person does it. Now, with your organization, you mentioned Access Intern. Is that the name of your organization or the
Name,
program you're
that's the
working?
name of the program. So the organization is Variety Children's Charity.
Beautiful. So, Variety Children's Charity, and you're doing some really great work as a charity. And I just want you to share a little bit about what Variety does. And then we have a look at Access Interns, that bespoke program that you are leading on. So tell me a little bit about Variety.
Yeah, no, so Variety, we've been around for 75 years now. I think technically 76 years. And we're a nationwide charity. We're really our big flagship of a program is our Sunshine Coach program. So these are fully accessible mini buses that are amazing, and they really give schools and local communities the chance to kind of go out there and not be confined to just the classroom. And that's an amazing program that's been around for, I want to say, 60+ years. So they're really great. And then we also do our wheelchair program, which gives out grants to families and young people to get like fully accessible wheelchairs. Unfortunately, the NHS ones aren't, they're really rigid and they're kind of only one standard format, whereas these ones are fully kind of customizable for that young person, so they can go out and gain their independence and learn skills, and they're not tied to, parents having to push them or anything, so they can fully take control of it. So that's amazing. That's another program that we do. And then we also do our individual grants giving. So those are like individual things that families up and down the countries need. It can be sensory toys, it can be kind of special equipment. So anything that they think that could make their child's life a lot easier, we're happy to provide the funds for it and support them any way we can. And then my program at the end of that all.
So it's about identifying a gap and filling that gap to ensure that those who are already disadvantaged, marginalized, are now brought from the periphery to the focal point. And you've used the word independence, which is so important to everybody. We are interdependent, but giving somebody independence is such a big boost to their identity and their purpose. Because often we think of somebody who has a disability as somebody who is lacking something. And we tend not to see what they bring to the table. But you're offering young people from year 13 an opportunity to show what they can do. Tell me a little bit about that program, how it is actually being run. And you've told me that you started off with 3 persons. You now have your third cohort, and that's 14 persons. Walk us through what is involved.
Yeah, so we operate kind of based on the academic year. So I think that's the best way we've kind of operated so far. And it really starts in September where I go out, reach out to all the schools in kind of, we've been traditionally based in London, but ahead of our 26th cohort, which is next year, we've had some interest from other regions up and down the country. So that's another challenge that I'll have to face in the coming months. But no, so we obviously start in September. We go all the way up until essentially the first term of schools up to January, where we're fully out recruiting interns and students, and we go out to the schools and communities and explain the program, encourage the young people to apply for the program, and really highlight the benefits. We really want to work with schools because we see as schools that these are amazing networks and we want to support them and help them because we recognize obviously that it is challenging when you're teaching 7 lessons a day, and schools in itself are just really busy places. So we want to lift that burden of them. So then obviously we go through that whole process of a couple of months of really kind of recruiting, and then we do an interview process. And I think that can be scary sometimes, but I always say to the young people, it's not about, I'm not testing you. It's more about, I want to make sure when I'm placing you at an organization, I've placed you in the best possible environment for you. So I think that's really important to get to know them and to really see what their skill sets are and what their interests are, and really just really look at it from a holistic point of view. We don't really look at academics. I think academics play a role in terms of logistics. If someone wants to go into finance, well then you're gonna have to have maths and English. It's not like that's just a bit of common sense. So we look at it from that angle. And then from there we kind of we recruit our corporates and we get them to offer our opportunities, and we then match the young person. We do it all in-house, so nothing is done externally. So it's a lovely day where I print out everyone's profile and everyone's corporate opportunity, and I just stick it on a wall and go, here goes. It's a funny thing to watch. So I'm still doing it the old-fashioned way of just like moving everybody one by one and going, this doesn't fit there. So we do that. And that's always fun just to see who can go where. There's a lot of logistics around that, travel costs and obviously like interest and what someone wants to do, and also timing. So making sure that everybody's timing overlaps and accessibility needs and all of that fun stuff. And then once that all's been done, our interns get the chance to meet their employer either online or face to face, whatever kind of works out conveniently. And that tends to happen during the half term. So hence why we're bound by the academic years. I reckon all of our interns are in their final year and studying for the exams, which I think was last days today. But
Yes, they're out today. Yeah, yes,
exactly,
they're
so
out
I hope they
today.
all do really well. But no, so yeah, obviously we then when everybody's been kind of assigned an employer and met them, we do a 1-day workshop at our office in Camden where all the interns come in, and it's really kind of about preparing for your internships. These are the top tips that I give you. These are just some reminders in terms of professionalism for some of our interns. It is their first time ever being in a professional environment. So it's just about reminding them of little tips, don't go on your phone, dress professional. If you're going to be late, let someone know. All of these kind of things that unfortunately get overlooked sometimes, and people just assume you know.
Yes, yeah.
That's kind of what that workshop's all about. It's quite a fun day. I bring lots of snacks to kind of be like, enjoy it and eat as much as you can. And then yeah, from that point, our interns obviously do their exams, and whenever they finish their exams, they go off on their placements for 4 weeks over the summer. And then that in itself is also scheduled. So all of the interns know exactly there's a work plan. So I know exactly what they're doing, when they're doing it, who they're assigned with. Their employer obviously has been given disability awareness training. I've met them personally. We've had lots of conversations about the reasonable adjustment. I give a bit of a picture of who that young person is a little bit. And then from there, they kind of start their placements, and I check in on them every week. And I think that's the one thing I always tell employers. And the young people by this point have gone to know me very well, obviously. Whereas the employer can also be still a bit nervous because it's their first time working with a younger person, obviously, and add the kind of the complexity of their neurodiversity or their disability. So employers kind of need a bit more of a just a person, just a bit, is this okay? Or am I doing okay? Which I'm more than happy to provide. And then they kind of, I always think if I'm not hearing anything, I assume it's all going well. If no one's emailing me frantically going, oh my God, which has not happened yet, so I just need to knock on wood that it never happened. But yeah, so they do their placements, and this year's been really successful, and I've heard really amazing stories, and the employers have been very impressed and really kind of loved the students in a way. They've really kind of really taken them on board and seen their confidence grow, and the young person himself seen their confidence and kind of felt like they've contributed to something really useful and meaningful. And yeah, and then at the end of it, I send them a lovely form which says feedback. Was it well? And then that's it. And then they go off and continue their lives. And we check in with them at a 6 months period to make sure that to see how impactful the program was to them. And then we do it all again in September.
Thank you for that. It seems a very comprehensive program, both for the prospective employee and employer. And you also have the evaluation to see the impact. At the moment, you said it's successful. Could I ask, of the 3 cohorts, do you have any members of the cohort who have remained in the jobs that you found them, or have they moved on to more education, apprenticeships, or a change of direction?
We've had a bit of a mixture. So most of us interns do go off into higher education. So it aligns that their placements are in those sectors. So someone wants to go and study finance, they get placed in a financial institution. So that really consolidates their love or their interest in that field, which is always great to hear. On the other hand, we also get it where someone does a placement and they're like, oh my God, I don't want to do that. Like, and they pivot and they go, nope, I'm not doing that, and they completely go into something else, which I always say is very useful. You haven't gone and spent 4 years studying or 3 years studying something and then realize you're not into it. We've had a few of them that have credited the program as letting them lead to a job. So they felt like this experience gave them confidence and gave them something to put on their CV, and then from there they were able to obtain employment. So I'm really proud to kind of have contributed to that side of it. We've had a few interns this year specifically that have kind of formed really good relationships with their employers, and the aim is that after they finish their university, they could come and kind of potentially work with them on an official basis, or pending what happens in the meantime. But we've the key, I think, to this, what sets our program apart, I think it's really about the matchmaking. And when you're very intentional about, I think that one of the corporates I spoke to this year was like, you knew exactly that you sent out like the perfect person. And I was like, well, yeah, that wasn't an accident. I didn't just pick his name out of a hat and go, you get this one. No, like I do really think about it, and I really make sure it's perfect, because when that works, everything else kind of falls in line. So yeah, so we've had not mixed up, we've had positively mixed result, which I think I'm really proud of, that everybody has found it useful, because I think the one fear I always had was that someone was wasting their time for 4 weeks out of their lives. No one wants to do that. No one wants to sit in an office not doing anything useful for 4 weeks. That doesn't help anyone. So I'm really strict on that, to be like, you're doing something productive, even if you're not enjoying it in the sense that this isn't what you're interested in, you're learning something out. And that's the
Yeah.
thing.
Thank you. As it relates to the students, what the variety of disabilities that you have encountered? And secondly, who are some of the employers that you've had that you've been working with, if you're allowed to share that information?
Yeah, I think in terms of the range of disabilities, our criteria essentially is anyone that matches the definition of it under the law, essentially. If you've got a long-term health conditions.
Yeah.
That can be medical, that can be physical, that can be emotional, sensory, or you know, mental health related. Anything under that kind of definition, that's our, yeah, I'm not going to argue against you. Regardless of your EHCP standard status as well. So that's also something that we consider, and we recognize there are students that have EHCPs but still could benefit from this program. So we obviously we don't kind of disallow those individuals into the program. Our range of disability in neurodiversity is quite diverse, I'd say, in the sense that a vast majority of our population tend to be on the ASD, so it's autism spectrum. They tend to be on that spectrum, and we've got quite a few who are ADHD, we've got dyslexia, we've got a few of mental health, which I think are always really that was always kind of making sure that's almost a bit of thing like, oh, people are a bit like, how do I work with this individual? And then we also get individuals with medical conditions as well, and physical disabilities. So we're quite and a bit deafness, but I think that's just because I'm deaf. So I just kind of like I attract individuals like me a little bit. But no, so we've got quite a diverse range. I'm trying to avoid the word variety.
Yes.
I don't want to too on the nose, but a
Yes.
still diverse range of disability, which I think is refreshing that we've not unintentionally picked one, because that's not
Yes.
the point. It's not about picking one and being like, this is the easiest. No, it's about showing
Yes.
everything.
Fantastic. And in terms of the employers, do you have a broad spectrum of persons who you've been able to make contact with and who are willing to participate in the program?
Yeah, so I don't know if I'm allowed to share their name. I mean, they are on the website.
Okay.
I feel like I have to message my PR
That's
marketing
fine.
person and be like, can I share this?
That's all
So
right.
they are on the website, so very obviously interested. But we do get a broad range of employers. So this year it was actually the first year we had anyone in the tech industry, which I thought
Ah,
was really interesting because I assumed, well, tech is easy, just working from home.
yes,
But
yeah.
but we've had our first employee from the tech industry. We get a lot from construction,
Ah,
which did surprise me a lot. A vast majority of our employees are construction based, which I think it's fun to explain to young people because they're like, construction, am I just going to be working in a site? And I'm like, no,
it is.
construction is very vast and there's lots
Yes.
of moving parts. So I feel like the construction world has been very receptive to this program, which was quite a surprise. And then we've got law, a little bit of law, legal kind of interest, and education as well. So we get I think because we try to meet the needs of our young people. So if someone comes to me and says, I'm really interested in working in, last year we had someone who was interested in veterinary. And I said, well, I'm gonna try and find, and we did. We found someone who was willing to take on a local vet in her area, and it worked out. So we
Oh,
tried.
wonderful.
I think we really try to tailor around the young person, but at the same time, we want to have a basket full of opportunities.
Opportunities, yes.
Obviously, trying to find new placements take a lot of time and effort,
Yes.
and that side. So we always want to have a bank of kind of ready to go placements that that kind of an on rolling thing in itself. So yeah, we kind of have a mixture of both.
Thank you. Now, we recently a publication came out, I think it was in June 2025, through the DFE, I think, and it says that there's 1.7 million persons with SEND, and that's an increase
Yeah.
by 5.6%, and that 5.3% of pupils with EHCP has seen an increase by 0.5%, and that autism is the most common need for students with EHCP, and speech, language, and communication needs is the most common need for students who need SEN support. Now, if our numbers are increasing as it relates to students with disability, SEND, and we're told that the number of persons who are unemployed with SEND has almost doubled.
Mhm.
What is it that we are not doing enough of?
I think what we're not doing enough with is that it's the transition from education to employment. I think that pathway, it's for some people, it looks very straightforward. You go to university, your disability, in a sense, is almost irrelevant. I think that's kind of the case for me. I think I'm deaf. Most people tend to not pick up on it. Just people just honestly forget. And I think I come across in a way where you wouldn't necessarily know. So I think I went through life very much like that. Like my disability kind of was irrelevant in obtaining employment. However, there's a vast majority of people that's not the case, where it is apparent or there's more struggles or you have to disclose it a bit earlier on or people pick up on it a bit more. So I think we're not giving young people and employers the opportunity to transition really well. It's often, either you go to university, or if you don't, you go to an apprenticeship, or even obtaining an apprenticeship. It's hard. It's not easy. I think people think it's just like a thing where you just sign up for it, especially if you've got SEND. It's more complicated. So I think that pathway is just completely missing. And then obviously you get caught up in, you can't obtain employment, and then that goes down to, claiming benefits, and then you become, what's it called, not an employment education
Need,
yeah.
need, not
So
employment or training.
exactly. So that I think it's the pathway. And I think, and at the same time, it's also ownership. I've spoken to schools and they say that some of the young people aren't taking up ownership. They're kind of expected to be handed things, which I think speaks a bit more on kind of like they're used to it in the school environment, especially if you're in the same building with the same teachers. Things, your teachers will chase up after. You're not really given that chance to kind of, you have to be assertive and you have to, you have to go and get it. So I think it's a mixture of things, but what doesn't help that there is no clear pathway, or there's not a lot of support out there. So you just don't know. I mean, all the young people I speak to, when I tell them what are your reasonable adjustments, they look at me and like, what are reasonable? They don't know what reasonable adjustments are. So it's almost like, well, how do you expect them to ask for it? In that interviews having to disclose a reasonable adjustment, there's always this fear of like, am I going to get discriminated against? I know the law says you won't, but that means very little to people on the ground. It just means like, okay, well, if they discriminate against me, what am I going to do? Sue them? I think, if you look at it from a practical sense, if you're lucky, you'll do that. But most people aren't lucky. They don't have the means, they don't have the energy, they don't have the time to do that. And also the confidence. I wouldn't be able to do that at that age. I'm not sure if I would be able to do it now. So I think there's a lot of things. I don't think it's a one solution fits all. I think it's it's hard. But I think there's lots of organizations out there that really, us included, that are trying to make it easier. We can't guarantee you a job, but we can at least guarantee you an experience and something to put in your CV, a network, or it just kind of, we're trying to help, and I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and that's important. I am aware that all schools with once they have students with SEND, especially those who have an educational healthcare plan, that during their annual reviews, once they are in year 9, they have what they call preparing for adulthood, and they should be looking at what's next in terms of education, post 16, post 18, apprenticeship, work experience, and so forth. So it's very telling that the young people that you're speaking with are, one, not aware of their reasonable adjustments, and two, are quite oblivious, ignorant of what the next step is. So there is definitely a gap between what should be happening in schools, especially for those in Key Stage 3 and up, in being properly prepared for adulthood. And so we do have to go back to the schools and say, listen, you do need to improve your game. You need to be doing everything to ensure that you're creating the correct transition for these young people in a very visible way while giving them independence. It's sad because if we don't have an organization like yours, where one of the things that you say is that you empower young people with disabilities by providing them with valuable work experience opportunities. If we don't have Variety, which is your organization, then we are on a downward trajectory for these young people who have disabilities, which means that it's going to be a toll on the government.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's almost like, well, I mean, yeah, but let's not go into politics, but it's like the whole thing about cutting benefits. It's like, well, that's not a solution. You can't just getting a job in this market is hard enough. I mean, it's just hard enough. I mean, it's not, obtaining employment is hard nowadays. At that level and at the age and the lack of experience and the nerves and nervousness and all that, it just complicates things, and
Yeah.
cost of living crisis doesn't help at all. So
Yeah.
it's just that you need to give people a path, you need to give them help because they don't know of us, so I think it's, yeah, not to get into politics, but I think it's just an endless cycle that needs to get fixed. And we do
Yes.
recognize that the earlier we start, the better, because we raise aspiration, we raise confidence, we raise the self-belief that you can do it.
Yes.
I think that's really important, but that takes time, and we're still kind of growing as an organization. But there are loads of other organizations that do that, and that's their sole purpose. But like I said, it is about. I think it's about helping each other. I think what I've noticed doing this job is everybody's kind of working in silos. Schools work in their own kind of world, in their own hierarchies, in their own systems, in their own ecosystem. Employers work in their own system. So when they're trying to link up, it almost none of it doesn't work because there's a real lack of, I call it a mistranslation. Whereas you guys are talking about the same thing, but because you don't speak each other's language, you don't know, and your point of views are different. So I think I've had to be this year more than any a real translator between the two of them, where I'm like, well, this is what they're saying. This because if you send a school once sent me an EHCP as the report on the student, and I was like, I am not sending that to an employer because they're not going to know what that means. So I had to obviously look at it and go, well, that's not what they're looking for. So I think it's that doesn't help. I think they really are run independently. And I think we need someone in the middle that can be like, you mean this, let's meet in the middle. And understand both of their point of views because they are different at the end of the day.
Yeah. As I'm listening to you, I'm recognizing how very in tune Variety is, your charity, in terms of being that bridge. Because one of the other things that Variety is doing is it's a grassroots advocacy. It has Voices for Change, which is breaking down barriers that prevent disabled children from low-income families from accessing sports and physical activities. And we do know the importance of exercise and physical activities for everybody, but more so for children who are disabled, because they do need the movement, but they also do need their oxytocin levels to be up to keep them upbeat and so forth. So what exactly do you do here in terms of Voices for Change, that aspect? If I know it's not your purview, but
it's not my world. But
yeah.
I can maybe I can give an example that highlights that point about young people with disabilities. They're not, I don't want to say excluded because that sounds intentional, but they're not given access. And the example I'll give you, I think, will highlight this, which is we had when I was working in a school before, we had a young girl, year 7. She was a Cochlear user, and her mother had so every term we had to create a risk assessment for her to access PE, which is bizarre because we've never had to do that before. We've had loads of students with cochlear implant. We are deaf provision unit, so we're very knowledgeable about that. So we always, every term we had to do that. And every time there was always something going on, and my student can't do this, my child can't do this, and then I think it just almost like, so what it ended up doing is we were under so much pressure to put this report out every term, which is a lot to do, where the mother kind of got to the point where she goes, well, she's not doing any sports then. And we're like, well, no, she needs to do sport because that allows her to engage with her class. And it's not nice for her to sit alone when everybody else is playing sport. Well, no, so I think it's that example of where they're not actively being denied it, but it's almost their disability acts as a barrier unintentionally. But I think that explains that a little bit. In terms of what it is, it's the Voices of Change. Again, I am not the person to talk to about this, but from what I remember and what we know is obviously it was launched of our disability sports awards, which was we had our
Yes.
award last year, which is it's the only one in the UK that we celebrate disabled athletes
Yeah.
at a really kind of high level athlete Olympians level. So
Yes.
we're proud to kind of be the only ones doing that. And the aim really is to go out to the community and to bring our young people and let them experience sports and let them actually gain a passion for it and enjoy it and go out. And some of them, this is the first time they ever leave their school or they're in a sporting facility and they're really learning, kickboxing or judo or anything, tennis, where they really get to kind of do a fun project with another stakeholder involved who facilitates it. And it's a really great thing that we're offering right now.
Awesome. I do like the idea that there's research that has been done. It's not just, oh, we're doing it on a whim.
No.
On your research, there is a need, and you're meeting the need, and you're definitely opening the door and opening it wide so that so many people can have as many interactions and opportunities as possible.
Of course, everything needs to be based on empirical research because then anyone can say anything.
Exactly. And that also gives it makes sense that you have that so that people aren't just saying you're being emotional. You're being objective, you're being rational, and you're showing the logic behind involving everybody and not excluding anybody intentionally or not. I'm interested in finding out, are you only focusing on mainstream schools, or do you zero in on special needs schools, or is it a mixture of both, and with what success?
Yeah, I mean, on the program, I think it's a mixture of, it's not really about schools in the sense that we're not looking at these are SEND school. We will recruit and find students in SEND schools only, and it's not really about that. It's just about where are they, and if they are in a SEND school, they are in a SEND school. If they are in a mainstream school, it's not really about where they are. It is where they are, but it's not really about the school. So we work with SEND schools up and down the country. We've got a network of 1,400 schools, and I essentially, what happens is I go to the school and say, this is the type of individual we're looking for. Do you think you've got someone in your cohort that could benefit from a program like that? If so, please get them to apply to the program. So it's really not about the schooling in the sense of that doesn't make us less likely or more likely to take you on. We have historically been predominantly mainstream based, which I think is just because London based mainly, just because I think I'm based in London and my background was working in mainstream schools, so I think that's where a lot of my contacts are. And I think SEND schools sometimes they have their own kind of system built up, which are amazing. So I think it's just making sure you're connecting with the right people at the end of the day.
And on the back of that, how would people be able to get in touch with you, individuals, parents, students, schools, if they wanted to be a part of your Access Interns program?
Yeah, the easiest thing is to email me.
Okay, and what is your email address so that if you're happy, just share it so that the listeners can just tap in.
No, of course. So it's Besme, so that's BESME.Almudaris, which is ALMUDARRIS @variety.org.uk. But if you just type in Variety Access Intern, I'll pop up at the bottom of it, of the page, and you can always email me. Yeah, we're really keen to collaborate with as many employers and schools as we can, because there's a need for it. And the kind of more we work, and my aim for the next upcoming cohort is to do 40. So it's a very ambitious target personally, but I'm fairly confident. Hopefully we can get, if not to 40, close to 40.
Close to 40. And that
Yeah.
that would be awesome. 3, 14, 40, definitely a progressive move, definitely a need. It makes sense that people buy into this program. It makes sense that people know about it. And it makes sense that we as human beings do what we can to ensure that those who don't have a voice, those who don't have an opportunity, because people mainly see their lack, are given an opportunity, and we create the platform for that. So thank you very much for that. I'm really happy that your program is for everybody who has a disability, whose opportunities have been few and far between. And one of the things I picked up in preparing for this was that people of all disabilities need a champion. Need a champion. I've just looked, and it said less than a third of disabled people with epilepsy, autism, severe learning difficulties, or mental health conditions are in employment. And the 2025 Access Intern Program is dedicated to creating accessible and meaningful pathways to employment. And I say kudos to you and your team, to Variety, for being the voice of the voiceless and allowing people to see the sense involved in doing this. Because what we want is for everybody to be able to be independent. We don't want people to have to depend on the government. Everybody likes to be independent, but everybody likes to be able to do their own thing and be given the opportunity. But if there's no opportunity that has been created, and it's difficult for them to create their own opportunity, then they will be seen as a burden. And nobody wants that. So thank you very much to Variety and to you for creating that space. It really helps. Thank you very much.
No, of course. I think, yeah, no, everybody wants to stand on their own, and be an active member of society at the end of the day. I think it's also about combating, misunderstandings, and thinking that because someone's disabled they can't do X, Y, Z, or we've lowered the standards, which annoys me personally on a personal level, because I've always said, well, you're not lowering anyone's standard. It's not like you've just been like, oh, like it's not that type of energy, because that's not needed. That's just pity, and no one wants to be pitied in any way. So it's about creating opportunities for that person, and challenging them. I think I do tell our interns, listen, don't expect to just be sitting down and this is challenging, because that's good. It means you're learning, you're engaging, you're growing, you're progressing. So it will be challenging. I think the one thing I always get is commuting. Like, oh, I don't want to commute, it's too far. And I'm like, oh, you live in London? 45-minute commute is very normal. It's very standard. It's part of life. It's, some people commute up to 2 hours. I think it's about having that conversation and being like, it's a part of growing up. But doing it in a way where it's compassionate, because you recognize that they are still young. I like to see their age first, because I'm like, they're 18, they're still legal, but they're still kids. They're still, they've not really explored the world too much beyond kind of their educational system. So I think it's good to kind of have those tough conversations, but come from it from a place of kind of kindness, and you're doing it in the right way. You're not putting anyone down, you're not demeaning anyone. You're just saying, like, listen, this is kind of how the world works, and we need to prepare you for the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where it's good for us to have persons outside of education interested in young people and young adults who have disabilities and who want to help them to stand on their own 2 feet. And yes, we will always be supporting one another, because even as adults who are not disabled, we need help. How much more we should be willing to help somebody who already has things that are stacked against them, not because they can't do it, but possibly because they've not been given the opportunity to do it. And so, we're really happy that through Variety and through your Access Intern program, this is happening. The language is important, the opportunities are important, and we do want those listening, corporate and non-corporate, people who want to be a part of this revolution. I'm going to use that word.
Love it.
Yes, to tap into making contact with you and opening their doors to giving these young people opportunities. I know a young man who is 35 years old. He has autism. And when COVID came about, he lost his job. And he has been trying to get back into employment, but it has been a struggle. But because of your program, he can now think, okay, I can try to tap in and see if I can find something. I know I'm 35 and you're really working with young people, but maybe I can do something. And, even I want the listeners to realize that we can be the platform for others, even if we don't realize it. But listening to this program, taking some cues from this program, we too can do something on our own to help somebody to get into independent living, independence of themselves. So, Besme, thank you very much for being with me this morning, for sharing your program, the impact that it has had, and your projection for the future. We definitely want to help you to reach that 40. So listeners, remember to touch base with Besme. Her email address has been shared. I will ensure that you have it on the below on the ticker tape so that you can make contact with her and offer her your company as a collaborator with her program. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for this episode of Let's Talk Sense. Thanks so much for joining us and being a part of this very important conversation. We'll be back soon with another conversation you won't want to miss. Until then, keep the conversation growing. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk